Kaikki mitä tapahtuu Pispalassa.
Tällä viikolla Sorisevassa Harjussa yhdistetään taidetta ja tiedettä. Keskustelemassa Claudia, Don sekä Pirjo. Podcast on englanninkielinen.
So, hello. Today we will record one podcast episode and we'll do it in English. This is the first one in English because we thought it would be nice to have a podcast episode for people in Pispala who don't speak Finnish that well yet. And also because it's quite good to have many languages in this podcast. So we'll do this one in English. We'll discuss art and science, and we have two people here. One is Pirjo Virtanen, and the other one is Donald Lupo. And so I would like you to introduce yourself first a little bit, and then we'll talk about science and art.
Okay, yes, good. My name is Pirjo Virtanen. We have never met with Donald before, but now we get acquainted as well here. I have lived here in Tahmela on Hirvikatu now for 23 years. And my background is varied. I've done lots of things in my life. First, I was a scientist. I did some research on material science and metals research in Tampere, Hervanta, and then also in Oxford, England. And then I jumped into industrial career. So I worked in a large corporation for 24 years, had a chance of leading some very strange and difficult and wonderful global operations there. Then suddenly, like 6-7 years ago, I got ill, a very, very rare blood condition. And it was basically a question of whether I'm going to survive or not. And when I survived, I figured out that, yes, I'm halfway of my life maybe. So what else am I going to do with the rest of my years here? And I started exploring art, among other things. But that's the short history. And Don?
Yeah, so I'm Don Lupo, originally from the US. Although I've been a German citizen since 2007. So science and music have kind of accompanied me pretty much all my life. I studied physical chemistry and physics in North Carolina and then PhD in Indiana, and then went to Switzerland for a postdoc and never looked back. Then after that, I also spent 24 years in various aspects relating to industry, but still all basically related to science and technology. So working for a chemical company, which also sent me to Japan for a year, working for an electronics company, working for a startup company, then working as a self-employed consultant, which ended up bringing me to Finland, Tampere regularly because one of my customers was UPM. And around 2009, 2010, when I was really sick of consulting, I found out that the Tampere University of Technology wanted a professor in materials for new electronics, and I decided to try my luck, not expecting much. And to my surprise, they offered me the position. So I started working there in fall semester 2010 and stayed there, built up a laboratory, supervised a bunch of students, taught a bunch of classes until I retired at the end of 2023. Moving here was also a musical rebirth for me too. I played a lot of music in Frankfurt, mostly sitting around tables at jam sessions playing folk music or rock songs in folk music style. And the incredibly creative genre-blind scene in Tampere inspired me to start moving out and applying my same curiosity about research to what kinds of sounds you can do with banjo and other folk instruments. And then after I retired, I decided to stay here and focus on music.
That's a really great plan. I'm still in working life. I work as a sustainability consultant and a board professional in Finnish mid-size and large companies. That's kind of half of my life, and the other half is now visual arts, and seems to be supporting each other quite well. So that I like being involved in both worlds at the same time.
So I'm Claudia Rivang, and I came to Finland in 2003 as an exchange student, and I was planning to stay here for 1 year. So that is now quite a long year. And I teach German at the language center of the university. Now I started my PhD this year. So I don't have an art. Oh, well, I do have martial arts, but that's another art form, I think. When I talked to both of you, I noticed when you talked about your science and also about when you talked about your art, I found that you somehow approach it in a similar way. I might be wrong, but at least to me it sounded that what Don already mentioned, that you see it as, okay, how can I explore this? What's possible there? Yeah. So can you tell us more about that when we start looking at your art?
Okay. Pirjo just pointed at me, so I guess it's my turn to start first this time. I think there is something related, and I think that's one reason I was extremely happy to get back into academia, because at the university, you still, of course, have to get funding, and it's helpful if what you're working on might potentially be useful at some point, but at least you can decide to look at something and try to get funding for it because you find it interesting and exciting. And in industry, it doesn't matter how exciting it is. It's just a matter of whether it's going to make money for somebody. And if you can't, sometimes you can convince people of that even for fairly long-term things. The beginning of my industrial career, that was actually quite possible in Germany. We actually got BMBF funding to do pretty fundamental research. But nowadays, the industry sees the university as cheap product development. So it's really hard to follow your curiosity in industry. So the university was great for me to start exploring my curiosity. And I actually managed to get a couple of projects that were really very extremely blue sky and crazy, which were a lot of fun. Trying to make quantum dots and make computers out of them and things. But also projects which had practical applications at some point, but still had a lot of interesting questions. But for me, it was always, what's new? What's new to learn from here, and what can I do with that? And I would say that's really the way I look at music as well. What happens if I take a banjo or a guitar or a bouzouki or an ektara or whatever, and what if I do this with it? What if I use these effects? What if I put an ebo on it? What if I, all sorts of things, and what sort of sounds can I get that that I would not have expected, and maybe other people would not have expected, and then can I make interesting music or noise out of that?
I recognize that really well, because for me it's essentially, art. It's exploration. There's not such a clearly defined target or goal as maybe in industrial technological world, but it's certainly searching for something that doesn't exist yet. And to me, art is actually defined by the fact that it's something based on what others did before, but you have to add something on top of that. There's got to be something new, some novelty in it. And then the other aspect is that it has to be somehow pleasing or beautiful or thought-provoking, or it has to have a meaning, not just that it's new, but it has to touch somebody somehow. I think art is also, it doesn't have limits. You can do, like you say, you choose your instrument, then you do something with it that nobody has tried before. I tend to do the same with my visual arts, that yes, there are some aspects that are kind of traditional, but I try to bring in something that was not done before. Or then sometimes I make a typical looking piece of art, but there is a hidden message, and I can be sure that not everybody notices it. And that's kind of intriguing, to build it in a way that I know that it reaches out to some of the people, but not everybody. Others could only see it. It's a picture, and that's it.
Do you have to apply for funding for your art? So do you think that this is limiting you, or is it?
At the moment, not, because I'm still active in working life as well. So I think that at the moment I study and I want to learn much more about the art world and how it functions. But I'm in a luxury position that I have had a working career, and I still have some monetary rewards related to the stuff that I do a couple of days in a week, and then I kind of fund my art with that.
I basically worked until, I guess, 3 months before I would have had to retire anyway. And part of that was because I enjoyed what I was doing, and I had projects I wanted to bring in, to finish, or projects to bring in, and students to supervise. But also because I wanted to work long enough to, with my patchwork of pensions from various countries, have a reasonable income. So that's the situation I find myself in now. So the idea is, as long as the music isn't too big of a hole, as long as the losses aren't too big, I think I can manage. It would be wonderful to get a grant to go on tour somewhere, but as a foreigner, it's probably not going to be too easy to get a finished grant. It's basically self-funded, and I try to get enough gigs so that a tour is not too much of a loss, or maybe even break even, and just hope for the best from there. So it's basically self-funded in my case.
So you would both say you are in a position where you actually can just do the things you want to do in your art.
It's kind of a luxury position compared to some people who would graduate into visual arts or music in the very beginning, and they have to make a career out of that. It's definitely easier to be an artist after 30 years of hard work somewhere.
No, that's definitely, and I did think a few times when I was younger about, well, maybe should I try to do music full time, and then I realized I saw what, except for the very few lucky people who were not only really good but also really lucky, that it was either starve or play music that I did not want to play. And so many of them were playing hit songs of the 60s, 70s, and 80s on guitar in Irish pubs, and that just sounded like hell to me. I would definitely much rather be doing science. And I enjoyed the science too, and it was reasonably well paid. So, but it's a luxury position, having worked for 40 years first.
I even think that grants are not for me. There are people who need it more than me.
Yes.
But there's of course some income related to selling my art.
Yes.
For instance, I get some commission works, and then I have maybe exhibitions and people buy some pieces from there. So there's some income, so that I would say it finances itself, but it's not something that I live out of.
No, I would say it's still a lost business for me. As long as it isn't too big, that's okay. But it would be nice to break even at some point.
But what is the major input to myself, at least? It's the fact that art continues to be very difficult. Not difficult, but I have a hungry brain. I want to learn something new all the time, and it keeps me entertained. I don't get bored. I can jump into an art project for a week or a couple of days, and I don't have a problem spending my time that way, because it's kind of rewarding. Every step that you take when you are exploring and you are not absolutely sure where you are going to end up. Well, I'm hooked into that feeling at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree. It's fun. It can be challenging, especially when you're trying to learn something new. For me, for example, I need to get back to it, but I started trying to learn bluegrass style banjo after playing clawhammer for 40 years, and it's a challenge. But every new challenge it's fun. It's especially fun when you succeed. It's again an interesting exploration, and another place once you've learned it where you can also start going off and research what you can do with it. And as I'm getting older, I think that anything that tests my brain is a wise thing to do as well.
That's true as well. How do you see the kind of collective cooperation within your music? Are you more like a lone musician or master composing something totally new, or are you co-creating with your friends?
Both. Solo, a lot of it is first me at home messing around with different things, and if something sounds interesting, then turn on the recording software and record it and look at it later and see if I can turn it into something. I also have a band, and there I would maybe write a song, and a guitarist would write a song, but we would bring it into the band, and by the time we've been jamming with it in the band, it's probably something completely different. And also even the solo stuff, actually, I have an album coming out this year, later on Iquisus, that is actually a combination of both. So I started in my room with a bunch of harmonium, drone, and banjo feedback and improvisation. And a bunch of musician friends took it and remixed it and added their part. So yohiko, throat singing, electronics, beats, whatever. And so that album is really good. It's really a group effort. Or it's a succession of two-person efforts, you could say, two-person cooperations.
Yes.
So I think both are important, because if you do it just by yourself, it gets very solipsistic. And then you don't really get the feedback, is this reaching anybody or not?
That's true.
And then once you send it to somebody else and you get good feedback and they say, yeah, I'd like to do this with it, then that again creates something new again.
Yeah. Yeah.
How would you describe the process if you start something?
Maybe visual art is more like something that you do by yourself, but I do have two very different stakeholder groups or friends and artists who are creating something similar. It's always wonderful to learn together with somebody else or exchange experiences and hear and tell about something new that you have found, and then compare to what they are working on. And it's very meaningful and necessary for me to be part of a team of people exploring. And also you talked about whether our art is touching anybody, whether we are reaching out for people. For me, it's been very, very important to have a studio here in Tahmela Huvila, so that people who are interested in art can actually stop by and visit my place, and we can discuss about what I'm doing and what they are doing, and also exchange experiences from that end. So it's nice to see actual people either in the studio here or in exhibitions.
Yeah, and I would say it's interesting because I think the same question applies to science.
True.
Because some of the wildest ideas that I ever managed to get funded probably started with some ideas in my head. I'd read this paper. I'd read about quantum dot cellular automata. I'd read about photoligands and quantum dots and a few other things, and I had this vague idea. Maybe we could put this together. But what really put it together was then going to a colleague from physics and a colleague from chemistry and brainstorming about that over a period of a couple of months, and then actually writing a proposal, which brought even more questions. Yes. So I think in science it's the same way. Sometimes you need to come up, you need to come up with an idea yourself, or possibly in a brainstorming session. But a lot of the times it starts in your head.
Then you share it, and it becomes more.
You have to share it and turn it into a common idea before it actually becomes something you can do anything with.
Yeah. And it would also be kind of, at least for social people, it would be a lone job to do research just alone in a hidden chamber somewhere, like I did in the very first part of my career when I was a material scientist working at one industrial company, Outokumpu and Tampere University, Hervanta. You probably know in the fourth floor there was this Center for Microscopy. Long time ago. Nowadays it's elsewhere. Konetalo.
Now it's associated with chemistry.
Yeah. So I did global level, top of the class, microstructural studies on copper alloys, but then I didn't have anybody to do it with.
Mm-hmm.
So that was definitely a limiting factor.
Yes.
I did my doctoral thesis, but that was it. Then I wanted to do something more practical.
Yeah.
But I did have the chance to be a visiting scientist at Oxford, and it was very different. When around the coffee table, I was explaining what I'm writing about, and then 3 or 4 people around the table said, "Yeah, I'm an editor of this and that journal. You could send it to me." And you are suddenly part of a team who is working on a very top level science, and you are part of the group.
Yes.
So that was really kind of life-changing experience. I realized I would be lonely doing research here. I would have to settle myself in somewhere in a larger group, perhaps. Nowadays, I think the science in Tampere, Hervanta, is also in material science. They are good, but it was the beginning phase when I was there. So I felt that I would probably feel better in industrial world because it's more extroverted and it's more related to collaboration and all that.
That's what actually kept me so long from starting the PhD, that I'm not alone when writing alone.
You have to concentrate so much.
No.
Yes.
So, but finally, building the pieces, building a network, and knowing like who my peers are, who I actually will get the feedback I need. Then it's like, okay, I'm not doing this alone.
And it helps if the topic is something very interesting, of course. That must motivate you.
Yes.
You wouldn't dig into it and be there for 4 years unless you are interested.
No, that's true. Yeah. But the constant learning process is really, really nice, and that's very enjoyable.
I listened to some of your music earlier, and I was wondering, because it sounds like exploration or searching, and you partially already touched upon it, but what are you searching for?
I think it's fairly goalless searching. I'm just I'm looking for sounds that are interesting, and then once I find the sounds, I see what I can do to make what I want to communicate. I don't know if you heard one song. I don't know if you listened to the song "Crystalline Light" from my solo album, but that's really came from. It started that I just wanted to. I mean, I had an interesting kind of a background drone thing that I thought was interesting, and I wanted to finally do a banjo song in what's called the Cumberland Gap tuning. There's loads of different tunings that you use in clawhammer banjo, and this is a kind of unusual one that gives you a slightly strange sound compared to just a normal open chord. And I got the idea after taking these walks in Pyyniki in the winter. I love when you have a winter like we didn't have this past year, when it's really cold. I mean, it's just so beautiful walking through the woods in Finland, looking out over frozen lakes, and the air is so clear. And so I decided, so in that case, I knew what I was looking for. I wanted something to kind of communicate that feel.
Okay.
And so I wrote the song, got some lyrics that kind of explained it as well. And and that was, I think, what really made me extremely happy was that I was in London in January, and I did a gig, a gig at a beer shop that does lots of concerts, and got a friend of mine who lives in London who's an old-time fiddler to do a set of crooked old-time fiddle tunes, and he gave me a lift to the nearest bus after the gig and was talking about how listening to that song made him start thinking it might be fun to visit Finland in the winter.
Really?
And then this song was a success. That was what I wanted to do, to get an idea of how beautiful that is.
So it's a combination of odd or weird sounds that you have not heard elsewhere, and then there is a message to be conveyed.
Sometimes there's a message, sometimes it's just a feel. Sometimes, and the feel might be, sometimes I like noise, sometimes I like smooth, pretty drones and some kind of improvisation. So that's just, I think that's much more abstract. I would just say kind of a feel. Not even, kind of a feeling. Not even sure if you say more aesthetic or emotional. I wouldn't say everything I do is super emotional, but I want everything to communicate some kind of feeling, whether it's emotional or aesthetic feelings.
Would you say the same about your art? Does it
In a way, yes. I was
Do the
thinking
same.
the noises or the sounds that you make, that's very similar to my feeling. My main media is modern watercolor.
Right.
So it's all about arranging situations so that the water and the color will flow nicely.
Oh, yes.
You don't put it in place, you just give hints that you should go that way, and then the water makes half of the work, and I do only half. So it's I like because it's not totally controllable. There are always surprises.
Yeah.
So taking that aspect into account, and then combine it with the fact that there is a message that I would most often want to somehow share with at least part of the public who gets it.
That's wonderful, and I'd say I'm only starting to go in that direction with the music. I think a lot of the music has been more composed. You know, I have a message. You know, I have a chord progression, I have a melody, and I want to put that together and then make a song. And I've done quite a bit of that, but I'm definitely interested in the next phase of music and in exploring more this sort of sometimes statistical or unpredictable. So just putting something together and not being sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your current project, Don? Some about your music projects, where you said you're releasing a new album this year, and then also Pirjo, so you're doing right now, and what's coming up?
Yeah, well, the album has actually been ready for quite some time. I've been looking for a label for quite a while, but it's not easy to find a label for a banjo, an album of extremely abstract banjo music, because folk labels don't like it because it's not folk, and other labels think it's banjo, it must be hillbilly. Plus, no, I'm still very, very unknown. So I was actually just very lucky through joining the team at Pet House, which is a wonderful cultural cooperative here. Pet House Harju. Through there, I actually met someone who had a label who was interested in putting it out. So after 2 years of searching, that's coming out.
You found it here?
I found it here, yes, through Pet House. Yeah. And there's a fair amount of work involved in getting that out. But even though the music is done, but that's going to take some time. A lot of my current project otherwise is just trying to get gigs for my band's tour in the fall. And we're always working. I don't have and a project that we're just starting with 2 musicians in Sweden, which is going to be a fusion of prog, which comes from Jonathan Zegel and Matthias Olsson's work in a lot of different prog bands and Jonathan's compositions, and folk and some free improvisation. So it's going to be an interesting. We started last. I had a show last May in Stockholm where I was already planning to play with Jonathan, and he brought along Matthias with a little percussion, and it was just so great that we decided we should make a project. So that's going to be my June project, going to Stockholm, and we're going to work up that material, do a few shows, and probably next February we'll come and do a short tour in Finland as well.
Good. Yes. I'm working on 3 projects kind of right now. We have an art collective with some of my artistic friends, and we will have a large exhibition in Haihara. Do you know the place Haihara Talli, the old barn building there? So 8 of us will have something there.
Excellent.
in June.
Okay.
And the theme is rewilding.
Oh, that sounds like a very important theme right now.
Yes, it is, and it's also something very visual.
Yeah.
We have 8 artists who all have very different styles, but we are working on the same theme, and we are exchanging ideas and showing what I'm working right now, and also getting ideas from each other. And that's really nice. And we have a some time reserved for creating what we are going to have there in April and May. So that's like halfway done in my account. Let's see what comes out of that. And then I have a large own exhibition coming up in November, December in Pori in Finland. And that's based on a theme called nostalgia. And that's semi-abstract paintings. And I have lots of ideas, but I don't have too many pieces done yet. So let's see what it's gonna be. And that's gonna be like typical watercolor. But in rewilding, I'm exploring installations and 3-dimensional watercolor and really weird stuff as well. So
definitely have to go see it.
Yes,
for sure.
And then there's a third one, like a side project, in end of May, beginning of June, here in Hirvitalo. I'm going to have some local, small, tiny, not traditional, but anyway, paintings about Pispala. So that's like a small thing locally.
I've seen some of them.
Yeah.
They're wonderful. Yeah.
So that's kind of the traditional, and then June the big exhibition in Haihara is wilder, and nostalgia is something undefined yet. But I like to have a theme, and I definitely like to have a deadline. So when I have a place where to build something, that's a major source of motivation to create something.
That's interesting. I find deadlines for music, for creating music, very difficult. Very hard for me to, for in science, yes.
Yeah.
The last 2 days before the deadline were always the days when the best writing got done. But I can't say it's worked for me that way in music.
All right. It certainly works. It doesn't work for me either, especially if we are talking about commission paintings. Somebody wants to have a painting of certain size or shape or color or theme. If there would be a deadline, I would be devastated. Yeah. It has to take its time before I get into the mood of creating something like that.
Yes.
But there's certainly many degrees of freedom, I would assume, in music and visual arts as well. So, and that is the main difference compared to science or corporate life. In art, there are so many directions we could go to.
Yes.
That it makes your head go round sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. I know this is more about science and art, but I guess for me, I would, since this is a Pispala podcast, I would have to say that not only Tampere, but especially Pispala has been incredibly important for me in where my musical journey has gone now. I think if I hadn't moved here, I would not be doing anything. I probably wouldn't be doing anything but what I'd been doing 15 years ago. So I'm extremely grateful to the whole Pispala vibe for
it's
the inspiration.
surprising. And I think the theory behind us finding the creative sides of ourselves here in Pispala is the fact that very different people live here.
Yes.
It's okay to be something else. You don't have to fit a certain template. And we do welcome people with very different backgrounds, and it's okay to change your identity while living here, and nobody looks weirdly at you.
Yes.
So I kind of appreciate it. This is, let's say, culture positive atmosphere.
Yes. Let's hope that continues to be.
Most likely, yes.
When we talk about that, Pirjo and I, we both have our work rooms here in Tahmela Huvila, and so I find it a very nice place to work in. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's just being in this place is actually like brings me to the area of work that I want to do, and I think I some of the inspiration actually also comes from this house.
Definitely,
and the
for me
area
as well.
around it.
You have to have a certain kind of atmosphere around yourself, your own setup wherever you create. It has to be motivating. It has to be a place that you can kind of retreat from your regular life and concentrate on what you want to be. And for me, the studio here in Huvila is definitely the place. At home there may be different things on my mind, but when I come to this place, I'm definitely the visual artist that I want to be.
Yes.
I understand that. I can see the attraction of that for me as well, except that I think if I were to set up my studio here, the noises I make would probably disturb most other people. So at the moment, I still do it in my bedroom, but at least I have a view of Näsijärvi to inspire me.
Okay, well, that helps as well. Yes, yeah. It's easier to create something lifting if you have that sort of open air around yourself.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you so much for allowing me to record this. And
thanks for inviting us.
Thanks for invitation.
So we'll hear you in Spotify and YouTube.
Yes.
Kiitos kun kuuntelit Soriseva Harju-podcastia. Podcastin löydät Spotifyn ohella myös YouTubesta Tahmelan Huvilan kanavalta. Seuraa podcastia Spotifyssa ja tilaa Tahmelan Huvilan YouTube-kanava.